course, I was a student worker in Don's office, and one of my earliest memories of you, and you and I have talked about this a time or two, was we were playing normal school number 2, which some people refer to as Western, down at Bowling Green, and I had ridden down to the game with you and Don, and Dr. Martin had gone down with our friend John Vickers, and J.C. Powell may have been in that group, but the 5 I remember were Dr. Martin, Mr. Vickers, and you and Don Feltner, and me. And after the game, and I just felt like I was in high cotton, because after the game here, this freshman wound up at a table at I think it's Claudia Shepard's restaurant there by on 31, coming out of Bowling Green, because as we were leaving the game, I heard Dr. Martin say, "Boys, let's go by Claudia Shepard's and get some of that good fried chicken." And so we were sitting there at that table, and I wound up on Dr. Martin's left, and Mr. Vickers was on his right, and then you and Don were there at that round table with us. And Mr. Vickers obviously had been saving this real good-looking piece of fried chicken, a breast piece, as I recall, for last. And Dr. Martin took his fork, and it was just a very practiced move. It was almost like gigging a frog. He says, "John, you don't want that chicken, do you?" And speared it right off of John's plate. And then after we were back in the cars heading back to Richmond, you and Don Feltner kidded me royally that when Dr. Martin speared that chicken off of John's plate, that I scooted my plate just as far away from Dr. Martin as I could get. But yeah.
Well, that reminds me, Dr. Whitlock, of our trip we took to the National Education Meeting in New York City. John Vickers and Dr. Martin, Henry Price, and I took a trip up there, and we had an alumni chapter meeting in Washington, D.C., and went on to New York for the educational meeting. We got up to New York very late at night, and we down the street, and they advertised that they're all you can eat buffet. And we went in there, and they had chicken on the table. And Dr. Martin went back for about 3 or 4 times to get some chicken, and about the 4th time he went back to get a piece, they closed it down on him. said,
"That's all you can eat."
That's all you can eat, yeah. And he, the way he was, he got gruff and got mad. And when you advertised it, all you can eat. Yeah. But they closed it down and wouldn't have him eat anymore. But he had a tremendous appetite.
Yes, he did. Had a tremendous appetite for food. He had a tremendous appetite for work. Dr. Martin. I often tell people that Dr. Martin and Ann had no children, so this campus was their home, and the faculty, staff, and students on this campus were the closest thing to children that they had, and he put all of his energy into this place.
Absolutely, and he expected you to put your energy into it too, and he came at the right time for Eastern. We've been very fortunate to get him at that time. Although I couldn't see him now at Eastern, it'd be a lot different.
The few of us that are still here that knew Dr. Martin fairly well have that conversation a lot. He was president at a time where you had nothing like the state regulations, the state coordination, and then the federal regulations to deal with that we have to contend with today. And given his desire for things to happen and for things to happen quickly, I think Bob Martin would be very frustrated in today's environment. But I agree with you; he was exactly the right person for this campus at the time. And I think we can say the same thing for JC, and the same thing for Hanley Funderburk, and we've generally been fortunate on this campus to have right people at the right time. And of course, you were on board back when the pioneer group in the Alumni Association was kicked off. In fact, you had the great pleasure of knowing pretty well Leslie Anderson and Clarence Gifford, who were members of Eastern's very first graduating class, and kicked off the pioneers. Of course, by virtue of alphabetical order, best as I recall, Leslie Anderson was the very first graduate in Eastern's history. Do you remember anything about your work with those two fine gentlemen?
Yes, I do. I will always remember that. And Anderson, I couldn't believe the age he was at that time, and he was instrumental in getting that started. We didn't have alumni was coming back at 60 years old when he was 60 years old, and so he suggested that and wanted that, and we started that for him, and I can never forget the time at Guilford. We had him here for a special program honoring him, and he came in at the airport in Lexington, or no, it was in Cincinnati, and he was coming late, and the patrolman carried him all the way from Cincinnati here to get him here on time. But those two gentlemen were very high in my estimation of Eastern, bringing back the old timers to get them back to Eastern.
And you said 60 years of old, but what you meant was 60 years since they had graduated.
Yeah.
I ran into one of those folks the other day who's a local fella, and he says, on one hand it's an honor, but on the other hand it's making me just aware of how old I'm getting.
Yeah.
And it won't be too terribly long till my 50th class anniversary is rolling around here.
Well, it's really amazing, and it gives me great pleasure to see, and I'm always interested in Alumni Association, to see how it's grown and developed, and the past alumni directors and the present alumni directors and things, what a good job they're doing in promoting Eastern, promoting the Alumni Association. It expanded quite a bit since we started back there in the 60s, and I'm very proud of it, very proud of what's going on at Eastern and also in the Alumni Association.
Yeah.